Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grant Thornton webcast on autonomous, modular, and private, the changing nature of personal transit. This is the first webcast in a series that we hope to bring you every month on current trends and exciting topics in the infrastructure space. My name is Brien Desilets. I'm the head of infrastructure advisory at Grant Thornton, LLP, the U.S. member firm of the Grant Thornton Global Network. I'm joined today by my co-host Naveen Lamba, who heads up our Smart Cities practice here at Grant Thornton. And our guest speaker today is Sven Hackmann, who is the managing partner of Rapid Venture Partners and the executive vice president of Next Future Transportation. Today we're going to talk about some very exciting issues in the transportation industry. Autonomous vehicles are the talk of the town in terms of how they can deliver better service for drivers. But we also see two different camps within the autonomous vehicle field, one focused on driverless cars and another on autonomous pod systems. And we see really an overlap here of the automobile and transit service, especially as more companies start to offer mobility as a service. And part of what we'll explore today is how transit agencies can potentially harness the new technologies in autonomous vehicles to provide better service for their customers and potentially take back some market share that many believe has been taken by ride-hailing services and related companies. My co-host Naveen is now going to speak about some of the challenges faced by cities in the face of these new technologies.
Thanks, Brian. And as we all know that our cities are becoming increasingly congested, and there's a good reason for it. The economies are doing very well, and consequently, there's lots of jobs, and more of the population is choosing to move to cities to take advantage of these career opportunities that they present. So that's the bright side, but one of the negative consequences is that it leads to a lot of congestion, a lot of traffic, and cities are trying really hard to keep up with this growth in population. The obvious thought is, hey, let's keep building new roads and that'll keep adding capacity, but it's very expensive and very time consuming, especially in urban areas where there is very little open land, if any. So the traditional approaches of building more and more infrastructure, yes, we keep doing that at a certain pace that budgets allow, but we have to explore more innovative ways of finding solutions that not just rely on infrastructure, but also look at some very promising technologies that promise to alleviate this situation. And both Sven and I, we worked at large corporations. Sven was at Siemens, and I spent a dozen years or so at IBM, launching their smart cities initiatives, where we did exactly this. Looked at innovative ways, innovative solutions of how we can sort of address the issue of mobility and alleviate congestion, and it has all sorts of negative air quality issues and so on. So one of the promising approaches is transit, where that promises more people to be moved in a smaller space. So whether it's buses, trains, you can move a lot more people in a lot less space. So today we're going to explore what are some of the innovations in that space. And traditionally, the transit has been there, but it comes with its set of challenges. And as we can see in this chart, that as I said, transit's been around and there have been challenges, but now we're going to see how we can overcome those challenges with some innovative approaches.
So if we take a look at this chart, it's data provided by the American Public Transportation Association, and it tells us a few things. I'm not sure if you can see the color coding there, but essentially red is bus and green is train, and then you have some other modes at the top. And really, bus service, I mean, buses as a mode, peaked out in popularity in the 1950s, and since then that we've seen declining interest, declining share of the bus among riders. This data is for the U.S. and Canada. At the same time, in the past few years, we've seen an increase in, well, really since 1970s, an increase in investment in rail projects, heavy rail and light rail. And this parallels the trend toward more urban environments, walkable cities, and especially as, you know, communities that were built for the car, including suburbs everywhere around the country, and also even downtown cities, more urban environments in the western part of the U.S. They've really faced these challenges of congestion and in a sense tried to catch up by investing more in rail. So there are some cross currents here. Of course, you've always got the gasoline prices, one of the drivers of transit usage, and the affordability of the automobile. There are many cross currents. It's hard to pin down these trends to one factor. In the past couple of years, you see the last bars on the chart, transit ridership coming down overall. And many people are starting to blame the ride-hailing companies for essentially stealing customers from transit agencies. And that, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webcast, one of the things we're going to explore is whether transit agencies can use some new technologies to try to win back some of those customers. But first, we want to look at a couple of innovations that we have seen in the transit space in the past couple of decades. And Naveen's going to talk a little bit about bus rapid transit.
So, Brien, as you mentioned, you know, light rail does offer a lot of promise to alleviate some of these problems, but as we know, building light rail again is extremely expensive. I mean, you know, it makes a lot of sense in many cities across the U.S. Because the demand is certainly there, but the money needed to build all of that light rail is enormous. And again, there is light rail building activity going on, but again, the pace at which it's happening is a lot slower than what all of us would like. So one of the sort of technologies that takes the best of, you know, light rail and what buses have to offer is a good hybrid. It's used very successfully in many parts of the world, and it's just starting to get traction in the U.S. The concept called bus rapid transit, which, you know, it's the actual vehicle that moves people is a bus, but it mimics light rail very closely, where there are exclusive bus lanes so that these buses, you know, are not subjected to congestion. They move very quickly. And as you can see in this picture, the transit stops look very much like a light rail stop, like a metro stop. So the big advantage here is that they are a lot more inexpensive to put in place. And the other flexibility is also that at the end of a bus rapid transit roadway, you know, they can just get off that and use the regular streets. So there is a lot of flexibility in terms of, you know, not only do they allow for that, you know, rapid movement on the BRT line, but once they're at the end, they can use the regular roads as well. So this is starting to gain a lot of popularity, and there are cities that are starting to do more and more of these, you know, LA being the latest example. You know, besides that, you know, there is, as Brien was mentioning earlier, you know, autonomous is the big buzz, but, you know, it's now gaining popularity in automobiles, but in transit, the technology has been around for a long time. I mean, there's several examples where, you know, a lot of the metro trains, they are designed and programmed to operate. Initially, it was semi-automatic, but later on, a lot of these trains, they can operate 100% autonomous. And there are several examples listed here that talk about that autonomous.
And Naveen, if I could just mention, Sven's going to talk about Dubai in a minute here, but Dubai has set some, as a leading city, Dubai is experimenting with different types of technology and autonomous transportation, and they've set some minimum targets for the next 10 years of bringing their transportation system to I think it's 25% autonomous. But in that calculation, they're including the metro and some other things. So it's not just about autonomous cars or driverless cars, as we've mentioned already.
Right. So, let's talk a little bit about, lately there's been an explosion in a lot of interesting, we all have heard of Uber and Lyft and other similar services around the world. Same thing with autonomous vehicles. We all thought that, yes, that's the way of the future, but, autonomous cars will take, 10 years to get in place. But now we see it's happening now. I mean, there are, just last week we heard that California has authorized these autonomous vehicles to operate on roads without any driver behind the wheel at all. So, holds a lot of promise, but I keep thinking that in the short term, things might get worse before they get better. Right now, the average occupancy in the U.S. is 1.1. With autonomous vehicles, I think it might drop to 0.8 or 0.9. You'll have empty vehicles. A vehicle drops me to work and then goes back home. There's an empty vehicle on the road. There'll be plenty of those. Similarly, on weekends, my wife and I, we split duties and we drive our kids to various activities. Now just, hey, send the vehicle, pick up the kid, drop off the kid. So there'll be a lot of empty vehicles running around, which in the short term, I think will add to congestion before things get better. Similarly, transit, as I said, there are cities increasing transit service due to the environmental impact. There are lots of electric buses now in place. They all are attempting to solve the problem, and they're doing things in their own little way. But, we need something that, makes a measurable difference. So luckily, as I said, there are very promising technologies, and Sven is going to talk about some of those.
Yeah, and actually, I just want to add, I mean, even in the busiest cities, you'll see those buses full at peak hours, but then, 2 hours later, they're running empty through the city streets. So now we're going to turn it over to Sven to talk about some of the, more innovative approaches that have been introduced the past couple years, and what they have to offer, and if the best of each of these can possibly be combined in a service. Sven, you want to take this slide?
Yeah. Hi, Brien, and thanks for the opportunity for me to participate in today's conversation. I should say that I'm particularly excited about the opportunity to present to members of the state and local transit agencies, and hope that we can broaden the discussion even after this dialogue. Yeah, so it is true that there's been a lot of innovation both on the technology side and on the solution side. At the same time, one has to question what impact those solutions will really have long term. I mean, are we alleviating congestion, and how does the general public benefit broadly? And so to speak to the solution that Next Future Transportation created, we basically took the best ideas and solutions that exist today and reimagined how they may fit together in one system. So rather than having the siloed approach that is represented here, all with the intent to solve congestion in a sustainable approach, and very importantly, while serving the public in full alignment with municipal transportation agencies. So this is not, a startup that is building something and sort of imposing it, but the intent here is to work in alignment. And so what is next? We are a mass transportation and goods movement startup, which is currently in the process of commercializing a patented, fully autonomous electric fleet with the supporting operating system that is required to bring the entire ecosystem of services to market at scale. So specifically not looking for, an e-shuttle or an autonomous shuttle in a community, but really looking to solve the challenges that you pointed out earlier and the challenges that are recognized at scale. And so we are unique, or Next is unique, I should say, in that it's the only autonomous electric pod company that offers a modular and therefore scalable municipal transportation solution. The solution is based on autonomous swarming pods, which can connect and disconnect while in full motion. So once connected, the interior space is shared, which is similar to a bus or a light rail vehicle. And then the operating system that we're creating allows passengers to hail a ride, very similar to the ride-hailing companies and solutions that we recognize today. Once the passenger is on board, our operating system will reassign passengers from one vehicle to another, all based on their final destination, as the pods will disconnect once in the area of the final destination, and thereby we optimize the passenger flow. And so the goal is ultimately to provide transportation and mobility as a service, again, in full alignment with municipal transportation agencies. So you can think of our solution as the iPhone for transportation, if you will, really a platform that will enable open innovation. So unlike past approaches where it's all about the company that is playing to win, the founders that I support took a fundamentally different approach, and that is really to involve the larger population, be it universities, innovators, companies, or the public sector. So if we have created a platform which is similar to the iPhone for transportation, the solutions that sit on top of the platform are similar to the iPhone's apps. Such solutions will be co-created. For example, it could be a food pod. Oftentimes we're asked whether one could, add on a Starbucks pod on the back, and of course that would be possible. It could be a mobile digital locker. Think of Amazon's stationary lockers. It could be a mobile clinic serving remote or disadvantaged communities. It could be a specialized pod for the disabled citizens. It could be a pod that delivers perishable goods with special cooling. It could be a safe children's carriage, or even an armored vehicle. Think of a Brinks truck. And last but not least, and this is important, we're asked, so what is your range? And so think of a pod being an oversized battery with the capability to swarm, where we can sense battery loads. If pods in circulation are low on energy, we can recharge them by basically just connecting to the fleet in motion. Very much like a military tanker plane that refuels aircraft in midair. So basically, there are technology considerations for mass transportation and municipal goods movement, as in parcel delivery. And then there are new business models that we anticipate will emerge that will be born out of needs within communities. For example, we were approached by one agency that had a conversation around the topic of vehicles as a weapon, as we unfortunately see around the world. Now, if you had pods for mass transportation that you are able to control, you set up the right perimeters around, say, markets or festivals, there may be benefits to that.
I think, Sven, I also want to raise the issue of this last mile, first mile, because a lot of transportation agencies, they have their trunk line, which, as we discussed earlier, may be a rail network or even a BRT, but then, they're grappling with how do you get people to that station and how do you make that convenient? And then, of course, in the transit space, there's always a discussion about, the one-seat ride, that as soon as you force people to transfer, even from one vehicle to another, never mind from one mode to another, you start losing ridership. And with Next Future, you really don't cover just the last and first mile, right? I mean, since the vehicles combine, it offers that one-seat ride.
Yeah, that's correct, Brien. So basically, each pod can carry up to 10 passengers. And the benefit, again, of the modularity, and I'd like to emphasize that over autonomous solutions, where I think autonomy is really a question of public policy and legislation. But the modularity allows for scaling, right? So an agency knows today what the demand is, higher during rush hour, less during other times of the day. And so you immediately address the question of utilization or underutilization, where the municipal bus is really an old modality, and one, when you audit most transit systems, is really the most unprofitable. So we certainly applaud the development around electric buses and municipalities embracing electric buses for all the right reasons. But again, with an underutilized modality, specifically the municipal bus, where that sits at about 20% utilization, spending anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000, depending on vendor, per electric bus, may not be the best solution. And so we believe that the solution we created has the long-term potential of replacing buses once the technology and the solution is
that's very interesting. And we've seen, it's easy to analyze some of those trends in the transit space because we have the data. We have less data on the ride-hailing companies, but increasingly people are starting to put a picture together there that's really not too different, where you have the ride-hailing drivers, spending a lot of their time with overcapacity in their vehicle. And, there's some reported heavy losses in that industry. And it's looking like, in some ways, a lot like a transit service. And so the rationale to sort of bring some of those services into the transit space, there's some logic to that. And it looks like Next really has a technology that allows transportation agencies to offer a service similar to the ride-hailing agency companies.
Yeah, and just the conversation we had, one of the cities we've been working with, they're very interested in this concept. So, Brien, as you were saying, the first mile, last mile. So just imagine that, each of these pods, collect people from one, like each pod goes to a specific neighborhood, collects a few people, and they all sort of meet up at the beginning of a BRT line, and they all combine, go over to downtown, and while that travel is happening over the BRT, the passengers redistribute themselves within the pods, and once the bus reaches downtown, these pods then go off to different parts of downtown. So that really makes it convenient and not have to transfer at all. So yeah, it's pretty promising.
I'm aware we've only got a few minutes left, so this is great for us all to discuss theoretically. But Sven, you've actually got some prototypes produced, and you've got some, you're bringing this concept to reality. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So over the past year, we have developed and built the first prototypes, which were introduced at the recent World Government Summit in Dubai. We've been very fortunate to be supported in the process by the Dubai Roads and Transit Agency, which is really supporting the vision of the Dubai leader, Sheikh Al Maktoum. And as you stated, there is a very specific goal to reduce combustion engine vehicles, but also to have much more autonomy. And so we're now in the process of discussing with Dubai a first commercial fleet, which would be deployed and hopefully will be deployed during Expo 2020, the World Fair, which starts in October of 2020. That event alone is expected to attract about 25 million visitors to Dubai in 6 months. So besides the innovation that Dubai would like to showcase, there's some real needs that need to be solved. And, we look forward to contributing to some of those solutions. And so what Dubai really has created is a living lab for transportation innovation. And I would say from an entrepreneurial and startup perspective, it's indeed that kind of dialogue with the transit agency, but also those living lab environments, whether it's on the roadways, as anticipated in Dubai, or in a controlled environment that that we welcome. And when I say we, it's really not about next. I'm oftentimes asked about next competitors, the autonomous e-shuttle companies. And to be very clear, we view them as innovators. We view their work as important work, nothing but respect. And we really hope that this space more broadly will be successful, and again in full alignment with municipal transportation agencies.
That's a very collegial approach, Sven. We've got a slide up here now on public-private service delivery options, and these boxes have some details in them, basically from different modes of delivering bus service that are used in the U.S. and in other places. And I'm not sure if you've given much thought to how or what's the vision for how you would provide this service or work with municipalities to deliver this service.
Yeah, so, as mentioned earlier, the platform that we created beyond the technology will offer entirely new ways to engage. And so public-private partnerships will definitely be the thrust of how we go to market. By the way, we won't manufacture the pods. They will be manufactured through recognized contract manufacturers, nor will we operate the pods. So we will align, and with the agreement of the agency that we serve, we'll align with recognized operators that are experienced both in the operation and the maintenance of the fleet. Where it's really about integrating our fleet into the overall mix. No shortage of discussions with potential leasing companies and financial institutions. And again, we look forward to broadening that dialogue and from the beginning, meeting with the various transportation agencies and communities to understand what it is that needs to be solved and how really a group of solutions providers, including operators and financial institutions, can model around the opportunity.
Yeah, and Sven, while our minds tend to gravitate towards people transportation, this has tremendous applicability for freight movement as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So last mile or municipal parcel delivery, autonomous parcel delivery. Again, imagine a fully autonomous warehouse. Pods are loaded with, say, e-commerce goods. Pods are towed into predetermined locations downtown, and the customer can pick up the merchandise from the pod by presenting a QR code. This will have major implications, and in part alleviating congestion once again. Some have argued that the growth of goods movement may surpass mass transportation, especially in North America and Europe, which remains to be seen.
So in closing, I just want to mention that, if our participants want to take a look at the prototypes that were delivered in Dubai, just go to YouTube or the web and, type in Next Future Transportation. You'll see there the actual prototypes and how they function and connect and disconnect while in motion. It's 1:30 now, so I just wanted to wrap up. Thank you for joining us today. We have our next webcast scheduled for April 6th at 1 o'clock Eastern, where we'll be talking about tolls, congestion pricing, VMT fees, Are We Lost? Our guest speaker is the esteemed Marty Wax, who's now at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. So that promises to be just as interesting and exciting as this webcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.